Okay, so dear friends, welcome to our next meeting dedicated to the cultural funding mechanisms in our region. My name is Vladimir Rus, and I will do the introduction on behalf of the Coalition of Independent Cultural Sector from Republic of Moldova. Using this opportunity, I would like first of all to express again our solidarity and support to artists and cultural workers and all Ukrainian citizens who face today for already 1 month the colossal losses produced by the imperial war started by Russia, who lost their dears, who had to leave their homes, or who are forced to stay today in Ukraine and live and work under the falling bombs over their heads. You have our support. Inclusive cultural policies, open institutions, and transparent funding mechanisms for culture in Eastern Neighborhood region is a mapping research project organized in partnership with Belarusian Council for Culture and the Cultural and Management Lab from Georgia, with the support of the Danish Cultural Institute through the New Democracy Fund. During this series of presentations, we invite cultural professionals from Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Romania, and Croatia to introduce their cultural policy frameworks and cultural funding mechanisms from their countries. Today's meeting is organized in partnership with Kultura Nova Foundation and is dedicated to the Croatian cultural context and cultural policy from 1990 to 2020, during which Kultura Nova Foundation was established through a bottom-up initiative advocated by a number of civil society organizations active in the field of contemporary arts and culture. The presentation will be made by Mariana Jurcevic, who kindly accepted and who works as a support program senior associate in Kultura Nova Foundation. Mariana holds an MA in Russian language and literature and art history from the University of Zagreb. Over the last few years, she worked independently on several EU projects in culture. In 2016 and 17, she worked in Education, Audiovisual and Cultural Executive Agency, Creative Europe Unit, as part of a traineeship program. The presentation will last about 30, maybe 45 minutes, and we will be followed by a questions and answer session. Mariana, you have the floor.
Thank you. Now I will start the presentation. Just give me a second for share screen. Can you see the presentation?
We see the, yeah, now we can see it.
Right, okay. Just a moment. That's everything. So, hello everyone, my name is Mariana and I work as a senior associate in Kultura Nova Foundation in support program department. Focus of my department is on a grant process, designing the public calls, application forms, and monitoring the implementation of the funded projects and activities. However, I will begin this presentation by giving a short overview of a political and a cultural context in Croatia since 1990 gained its independence and started with transition period from socialist to democratic country. So this overview is a part of analysis commissioned by the Croatian Ministry of Culture and Media and will be officially published in the coming period. The director of Kultura Nova Foundation, Davidovic, participated in it together with other researchers and professionals. So this division into 4 developmental phases is rather new and will certainly be further discussed and studied. So the first phase, beginning in 1990s, yes?
Sorry, we can also see the Google document. Maybe you could share just the presentation screen.
That's the wrong part. Sorry.
It just overlaps with the presentation and we cannot see.
Yeah, I checked now.
It's good now, yes.
And can you see now my presentation?
Yes, we see the presentation now and no Google Doc.
And just a second, and can you see this folder?
No, just the presentation.
Okay, I will go through another, maybe because it overlaps with a PDF. Just a second. No. Sorry for this delay.
But my question is, did you want to share also the...
No, I have the text ready if anyone is interested, but actually just for me not to lose track during the presentation. Can you see this document now or just the presentation?
Just the presentation now.
Okay, so let's go back. So the first phase of cultural development began with the establishment of a new Croatian state, as I said, in which culture and cultural values and freedom of cultural and artistic creation were ranked among the highest constitutional values. Sorry, that's another slide. So in 1994, after a successful initiative called 1,000 Signatures, which was led by artists and cultural professionals, the Ministry of Culture of Republic of Croatia was formed as a separate state administration body in charge of culture. And in addition to taking over the old ones, several new laws and other regulations in the field of culture were passed during 1990s, as well as the first comprehensive experts analysis of the entire sector, which was presented in the document called National Report on Culture Policy. So in the first decade, cultural policy was marked by the dominant ideology and political standards of the governing structures. And preserving the continuity of the past cultural and political system was most visible in the legacy of a public cultural institution with their associated resources as human, spatial, material, and technical. So the preference was given to the public and traditional cultural institution because they were recognized at the time as actors who will carry out the affirmation of new general values of society. The second phase of cultural development begins with the political changes in 2000 and the crucial constitutional change of the socio-political system from semi-presidential to parliamentary happened. This period was also marked by the great international financial crisis from 2008 onwards, and which also had consequences for the cultural sector. At that time, the main role in management and financing for culture is played by the Ministry of Culture and other bodies at lower levels. Such model was most noticeable in the encouragement of artistic creativity and cultural activities. Now, within the program of funding public needs in culture, we finance from the state budget. This phase also had its focus on the public sector in culture. However, most of the funds are allocated for the work and the organizational survival of the public sector and far less funds for the development of other actors in the cultural system. So, although there are no serious reforms of the entire system at this stage, new opportunities were opening up, primarily in the area of decentralization and decision-making, financing and the empowerment of new actors in the civil sector, in culture, and entrepreneurs in culture and creative industries. And the trend of decentralization in decision-making continued with the establishment of two new institutions, so-called at arm's length, and that's Croatian Audiovisual Center, HAVC, in 2008, and Kultura Nova Foundation in 2011. HAVC, that is Audiovisual Center, has taken care of audiovisual activities, while Kultura Nova, the first public foundation in culture, was established to support civil society organizations in contemporary arts and culture. So these are institutions that are not governed by the state, but have transferred responsibility to them and given them legal and fiscal autonomy of decision-making. And the goals of these institutions are related to the development and improvement of specific areas, and funds are channeled to their beneficiaries based on decisions of independent experts who are involved in the evaluation process of project proposals. Now, however, these culture policy trends still need to be read from the legislative framework as well as from the funding priority at this stage, which was also directed towards the high arts of public institutions and to a lesser extent to the creative industries and other non-institutional and non-profit actors in civil society. Now jump to the third phase of the development of Croatian culture policy. It begins with the accession of Croatia to the European Union, which is 2013. And when in the context of Croatian cultural policy, the implicit cultural policy of EU becomes increasingly important. So Croatia participates on an equal footing with other member states in the initiatives of the European Commission, European Parliament, and various working groups of member states representatives. For Croatian cultural stakeholders, be they artists, creative individuals, public cultural institutions, non-profit actors or cultural entrepreneurs, in addition to the existing national state budget, Croatia's accession to the EU opened access to all programs and tenders for culture, for example, European Social Fund and European Regional Development Fund. However, this third phase was phase of new opportunities was abruptly interrupted in early 2020 by a new global crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic. And that, from this analysis, introduces a new fourth phase of cultural policy that will lead us to the numerous changes and probably discontinuities compared to the previous phase. The Ministry of Culture has adopted a series of measures to overcome the acute crisis, and the budget for culture has been redesigned for this purpose. And many artists and cultural workers have been provided with financial support in surviving this phase of complete stagnation. Though we are in the beginning of this new post-pandemic period, some conclusions can be made. Looking into the future, it will be crucial to imagine new approaches to cultural democracy that could offer democratic response, direct citizens' participation, and access without any obstacles. Now, we will go back to Kultura Nova and the so-called bottom-up initiative, which led us to its foundation. The establishment of Kultura Nova marks one of the most significant steps in cultural policy in the period of past 20-25 years in Croatia. Civil society organizations, I will say so further on, active in the field of contemporary arts and culture have played an important role in the cultural system in Croatia. In their work, they promoted contemporary art and culture and practice mostly unknown to the Croatian public. And by encouraging interaction between various artistic, cultural, technological, political, social fields, they made a considerable contribution to the development of contemporary culture and the society as a whole. And in the beginning of the new millennium, certain steps that would have a positive impact on the development of this specific field were made. However, these changes were not sufficient to secure the field's sustainability. With the passing of the law on council 2001, Ministry of Culture founded the Council of Media Culture, which began financing programs of culture civil sector through the same system of public needs and culture. The establishment of such committees and subsequently councils on local levels granted the CEOs active in culture access to national as well as subnational sources of funding for their programs. However, this model still cannot support self-established collectives in the civil sector, nor provide answers to their needs in the same way it caters the public institutions in culture, which receive financial support for their operative costs and programs on a yearly basis. So, not dealing with the systemic problems of the sector of civil culture, and the lack of reforms in the public system and cultural system, as well as at the time ongoing financial crisis that caused cuts in the budgets for culture as well, became a key obstacle to the stabilization and further development of CAOs and in the field of contemporary arts and culture. So due to the sad situation in 2004, a number of CSOs active in the field of contemporary arts and culture began advocating the establishing of a separate foundation for the sector of civil culture that would serve as an additional source of funding within the existing financing system for culture. This initiative was recognized and supported by the Croatian government and the Ministry of Culture. And the process of founding Kultura Nova extended over several years. It included representatives of COS, different state administration bodies, and public government bodies and experts. Kultura Nova's purpose, activities, core assets, financing, and other regulations concerning Kultura Nova activities are defined by the law Kultura Nova Foundation, which was adopted by the Croatian Parliament in 2011. So it means 7 years of advocating the process. The establishment of Kultura Nova Foundation as a new additional source of financial support for the CSOs in the fields of contemporary arts and culture marks as one of the most significant steps forward in cultural policy in the period of the past 20 years or so. Is the first public foundation in culture, in the sector of culture, that has the autonomy based on the arm's length principle, and it has obligation to secure better conditions for civil sector in contemporary arts and culture than to strengthen CSOs and to participate in building their organizational and program capacities. Since its establishing, Kultura Nova has been counterbalancing this situation by providing support for CSOs' work and has matched their commitment in inducing positive changes in cultural policy provision. It really became a relevant institution on the local and regional level, with distinct resonance on European scale in providing multidimensional perspectives and critical approaches in debating and contributing to cultural policy change. So Kultura Nova functions as an operational and grant-making foundation, provides professional and financial support to programs developed by CSOs in the field of contemporary arts and culture. And maybe this is also interesting, Kultura Nova is financed from the portion of profits made on games of chance and promotional award games in accordance with the law, as well as from its core assets, income made from core assets, and other incomes in accordance with the law. Now about the structure of the organization. The board of directors and the director are the governing bodies of Kultura Nova Foundation, and the work is organized within the framework of the administrative service that is coordinated by the foundation's director. Members of the board of directors are appointed by the government of the Republic of Croatia at the suggestion made by the Minister of Culture, while the director of Kultura Nova Foundation is appointed and relieved by the majority vote of board of directors. And the administrative service has 3 separate departments. That's Department of General Affairs and Finance. The other one is Support Program Department, which is where I work, and the third is Research and Development Department. Just before going to support program, I will just say briefly describe the R&D program. So alongside the support program in 2014, Kultura Nova started with the implementation of research and development programs that led to forming of the R&D department. By initiating R&D programs, Kultura Nova created added value its primary activity that has been realized through grant making to the CSOs in the contemporary arts and culture. Activities carried out within the R&D department are complementary to those of the support program department and are directed toward projects that aim to contribute to the growth and stability of CSOs in the field of contemporary arts and culture, as well as development of knowledge about contemporary arts and culture, recognition of the importance of arts and culture in the general development of the society. On the other side, support program represents the foundation's core business through which public calls are published. Support program is the umbrella name for all public calls through which non-refundable funds are granted for project proposals and for participation in activities of CSOs, that is for associations and artistic organizations which are active primarily in the field of contemporary arts and culture in the Republic of Croatia. This gets a bit complicated. Now, Kultura Nova does not see contemporary arts and culture as overall arts and culture made today, but as experimental, research, critical, and socially engaged practice. It sees CSOs as the key bringers of new tendencies in arts and culture. Kultura Nova has defined the support program priorities, which you see on the screen, through which it is possible to read what are the key baselines of contemporary arts and culture as Kultura Nova sees them. So all applications must meet at least 3 of the 5 priorities at the organizational and the project proposal level to be financed. Now I will go to program areas, which is something we tend to change. Currently, we have 9 program areas. So grants are awarded through a number of program areas that represent priority areas, and they comprise support program. Program areas and categories were created as a complementary measure to the existing sources of funding at national, regional, and local levels in Croatia. They are designed and defined to accomplish the foundation's goals and to answer the recognized priority problems of civil society organizations, to ensure more beneficial working conditions for them, to contribute to their stabilization and to the development of their organizational and program capacities. So Kultura Nova creates various programs through which it improves organizational capacities for art production and independent cultural spaces, encourages the development of new cultural and artistic projects. It strengthens the cooperation between cultural organizations on European, national, and local level. It supports development of cultural participation and tries to create better conditions for organizational and artistic memory. All program areas are determined by specific goals, formal conditions, and criteria for granting of funds, and some areas are divided into categories which represent a specific part of those program areas. So you can see the first program area, and it is directed towards improving working conditions, building and strengthening organizational and program capacity of CSOs for production and distribution of works of art and projects in all artistic disciplines, as well as for managing spaces for arts and culture. The second one is directed towards creating more stable and quality preconditions for conception and preparation of new cultural and artistic projects, and it refers exclusively to pre-production. The third one is directed towards creating more stable and quality preconditions for the elaboration and questioning of new artistic ideas, research, experimental processes, and other work. While the fourth area tries to contribute to the stabilization, cooperation, and networking in Croatia through advocacy, program exchange between organizations, cooperation and dissemination of knowledge, different experiences and good practice. The fifth area tries to contribute to the same things, to the stabilization of regional and interregional cooperation and networking in Europe through advocacy, program exchange, cooperation, and also dissemination of knowledge, of experiences and good practices. The sixth program area, it tries to contribute to the creation of more stable and quality conditions for a comprehensive organizational transformation towards developing cultural participation. So basically, it's a level up from the audience development, which was the ex name of the same area. The seventh tries to contribute to the creation of more stable and quality conditions for organizational and artistic memory, so that various processes or key problems or accomplishments of civil society organizations, artists, or specific artistic and cultural fields could be articulated. And the eighth area is something that we don't publish regularly, but it is intended for strengthening organizational capacities through ensuring opportunities for professional development of civil society organizations representatives and for building their knowledge and skills in cultural management. And the newest one is supporting crisis situation, and that area is intended for mitigating immediate and long-term effects of recent or future crises on organization. Now a bit about the grant process. So the grant process has been carefully constructed and well thought out and improved on the basis of comments from beneficiaries, from applicants, as well as a number of other relevant bodies and actors. All grant procedures, as well as priorities and criteria, are announced in advance and are publicly available on Foundation's website to all applicants. The public calls are usually published in the first half of June, and the overall granting process, which includes application submission, formal conditions check, applications level quality evaluation, publication of results, then we have time for complaint submission, a response to complaints, and contracting process, and that all is finished by the end of December. Also, specific public calls can be published during other periods throughout the year. Applications are submitted exclusively in electronic form using the Foundation's electronic application system. The application forms are defined in accordance with the set criteria, and based on the answers that are given in the application form, each criterion can be assessed by external evaluator. At the moment, we have 5 established groups of criteria. 3 groups, first 3 refer to the submitted project proposals, and the last 2 to the implemented project, and those apply only to those organizations that had the financial support in previous year. The first group of criteria determines whether the organization operates in accordance with the selected priorities, the ones I showed before, whether the proposed project is in accordance with the selected priorities, or whether contemporary arts and culture are the basis of the organization and the project it implements. Compliance with the program area and category in which the application was submitted is also checked and has to be met. Quantitative criteria refer to those values that are automatically calculated on the basis of the answers in the application form, and for which no assessment of the independent, that is external expert, is required. We work on decentralization. For example, if you live in decentralized area, you get more points than in urban or bigger cities. And then quality criteria, each program area and category have its quality criteria for the allocation of funds that are also defined in accordance with the priorities and objectives of a specific program area. These criteria are comprehensive and they include a range of aspects that are crucial for the implementation of programs. And the most important criteria are the quality of artistic or cultural program, anchoring in contemporary artistic and cultural practice, and references and capacities of the organization. Some areas have their own specific criteria. For example, the strategic orientation of the organization, the quality of cooperation, professional experience, motivation of applicants, and similar. And now the last two groups of criteria. Kultura Nova is one of the few institutions that actually has applied the practice of evaluating supported projects and has brought a new application in correlation with the implementation in previous period. This practice was gradually introduced, first with the assessment of administrative performance, and then next to it with the assessment of quality of the implementation, for which points are awarded by independent experts who were part of a committee during evaluation process in previous year. So in conclusion, though there were some positive changes in the funding structure and culture from 2010 onwards, civil society organizations are still facing continuous budget cuts on national and local level, as well as the declines of physical spaces for their activities. Despite the strong potential they have for development of cultural programs, artistic concepts, and collaborations, these organizations have been systematically driven to the threshold of their financial and organizational endurance. And the dominant project logic work in the civil sector has taken its toll, especially on the professionals that work in this sector. Consequently, the CSOs have been chronically exposed to unstable, project-led, and non-standard working conditions, while the state of crisis is their permanent state, followed by also social insecurity. And being the only public body that is solely committed to sustaining and developing the civil sector in contemporary arts and culture, Kultura Nova is trying to continuously confront with the challenge of getting an adequate insight into the needs and operations of the cultural civil sector in order to be able to actively contribute to the creation of long-term strategies in the field. Kultura Nova puts all its efforts in permanent monitoring and organizational and program needs of CSOs in finding the adequate responses which are applicable in various contexts and can be adaptable to local circumstances. So we are continuously developing and rethinking our activities and always trying to improve program areas and the overall granting process based on the views and comments we get from the managing bodies, the administrative service, recommendations by external evaluators, also comments and suggestions from the beneficiaries and applicants through public consultations. So at this moment, we are in one process and will probably implement some changes in the new round of public calls in June this year. So I think even though I could go more into detail of the grant process or general function of Kultura Nova, I think this is maybe enough to get a general insight and picture of how we work. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask, or if you're interested in the technical aspect of the grant process and work with independent experts body, that's also something you might ask. And I will actually stop now, or maybe what I mentioned in the beginning, I might not be able to provide all answers, and in that case you can write to our email or my email, and if I don't give you an answer right away, maybe we can write it later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. We can maybe go back to the screen with all people just to see who would like to address questions. Please raise your hand in Zoom or by hand, or just write them in the chat box and we will take them one by one. Right now, if there is no question right now, I would, Tamara, you are.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It was super informative, and I think it will be also very useful for us. My question is regarding this bottom-up initiative that you mentioned, because I guess it is really hard to self-organize for such a big purpose. Can you please elaborate a little bit on it, how you started the process? Because before beginning of the session, you also said that it was quite a time-consuming process and it took a couple of years even. So we are trying to organize something like that in Georgia, but it proves really very difficult to get to the meetings and to have the regular meetings and to agree with everyone, not to leave out anyone. So how did it all started and how was the process itself? So what was the biggest challenge for you that you needed to overcome?
Well, I need to say that it began in 2004, and at the time there was no foundation, and I wasn't actually active in that process. I'm younger than that, not too young, but still. So it began as a initiative from civil society organizations, from the most prominent ones, and who, well, advocated on a national level to form a separate body that would give operational, primarily operational support for their programs and activities. So basically, there was no stable income, and still there isn't. And they wanted a body that would, where they could apply for substantial funds for operational needs, that is salaries, equipment, for example, administrative services and fees, and so on. And that money, that is grant, could not be asked from the ministry, because the ministry gives funds primarily for programs. And to do a program, you need people to make to make them and to realize them, and which is why you need like means for operational functioning of specific organization. And it was an ongoing process. And in 2011, it was officially formed. That is, ministry listened to them, and Kultura Nova was founded. It's still not enough. We don't have enough money for all organizations that apply for our grants. We can, let's say, there was a slide saying how many millions. Well, overall, in our 10 years of existence, it was above around 11 million euros. And in last year, 2021, it was a million and something for support program. But we get applications worth over 2.5 million, and we can give only million and something, which means threshold is 50%. Not everyone can get funded still. We don't have as much money as we would like to have. Or maybe what's interesting, I have some percentages actually. So we get funded from lottery and games on chance and so on. And that fund, like 100%, 14.44% goes for the whole culture. And within that 14.44%, we get 17.6, 17. That's so basically there is money, but it's just on different sides. It goes for sport, for Red Cross and other civil society organizations, and we get only for culture. And we fund only organizations active in culture and arts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you say the process lasted something like 7 years to establish the Kultura Nova, and who were the main, beside the civil society organizations who led the campaign, who were the partners to create, like how the process have, if not step by step, but if you kind of general, like what were the steps during these 7 years to establish it? Was it like a visibility campaign in the very beginning, then there was some kind of maybe working group? How was it organized, if you know?
Yes, I know, like generally, maybe there is a director who was and who is in Kultura Nova from its very beginning, knows that in very much detail. And as I said in the presentation, besides representatives of prominent civil society organizations, there were a group of experts who worked on establishing Kultura Nova, and also representatives from ministry, cabinets, and people from the field, active in the field of culture. Well, they participated in the process, and they participated to settle the organization as such, but transformed, and the course of Kultura Nova happened over the years. So for example, how we set priorities, how we set areas, that's something that we can do internally. And the thing is, we set programs area and which are complementary to the existing models, but not the same. So we cannot grant for something that is already being granted in some other levels, be it national, regional, or something. And no one gives operational funds, or gives at least small percentage, which is not enough.
So it's more like an operational fund, or the priority is to support civil
organizations. As I explained, we have priorities, and then we, according to those priorities, we have several program areas, which I briefly described. For example, but we have areas that are primarily operations. That's the first area. The biggest amounts are invested there. Let's say out of 1 million euro, it would be over almost 2/3 of that. And then the rest is invested in cooperation to connect and to strengthen organizations. We support platforms, and that way organizations from different parts of Croatia can communicate and exchange artistic and cultural programs in smaller surrounding cities and places. And also we have program areas which are not that operational, but serve as an initiative phase. For example, area 2 and 3, those refer to exploring new artistic ideas. So basically, as an artist, you can get funded for exploring your new idea, which might or might not conceptualize further on. So we give in those areas which are not covered on other levels.
Yeah, I have a similar question related to this. How is this contemporary art reflected on Ministry of Culture level? If it's supported, I mean, it is supported through projects, if I understand. There are still grants for cultural organizations from contemporary art field. as well, or it's not very well defined as a separate field, as a separate sector?
So Ministry of Culture has many areas, and they define their goals based on a specific artistic or cultural area. We have only one list, and it covers all areas, which means if you're active in music, film, literature, or audiovisual or performing arts, you will, like say, end up on the one ranking list. And ministry has other criteria, and civil and there can apply institutions, individuals, collectives, and also civil society organization. But proportion for those organizations is rather small and does not support operational costs, which is why they managed to advocate for another body, that is Kultura Nova, which would cover that part of costs and grants. So the percentage in ministry, there is some, I don't know which one, but it's not the same and it's not enough in any case.
Vyacheslav?
Mariana, thank you for the presentation. My question, who is the founder of the foundation, Ministry of Culture or government? And how is the relation between the founder and the foundation? This is for first questions. And technical, how you received the money, direct from the budget or by the Ministry of Culture? And third, you mentioned the law of councils of culture. Can you say more about this organization or this institution? What is the role of the council and what they do?
Okay, so maybe I won't share a screen, but there is something, maybe I could share a link from my presentation. In the chat, it's called Compendium, and on that you can find many information regarding cultural policy, in this case in Croatia, but also in, just a second, in other countries as well. Can you see the link now? Okay, basically everything about cultural policies and processes is described there, also in law and legislation. You can read more, and cultural policy system. As I said, that I would say something more and maybe more precise, but let's say that we are not part of the ministry. We are a public institution, and our founder is state. And we are not funded through Ministry of Culture, but the ministry is kind of a intermediator between us and government, just to make the process easier. So, for example, when we give our financial and operational report on a yearly basis, it goes on a government, but through ministry, which is just like a body between us and government. And as I said, the board of directors and the director are in charge, let's say, of foundation. The board of directors is chosen by the Ministry of Culture, Minister of Culture, and then the director of Kultura Nova Foundation is chosen by the board of board of directors. You say about the third question was about loan, right? Well, that's something I'm not quite familiar with, and maybe this compendium can help you to read further on that. But basically, so we have our Kultura Nova has something that's called committee or independent experts body. So which means currently, just a few days ago, we published a new call for external experts. And then that call is open for a month. And then we collect their applications in a pool, which we keep active for 3 years. And then out of that pool of applications, we choose experts body consisting of 3 to 15 members, which work on applications and evaluation process. Something similar, but just very different, has its committees within the Ministry of Culture, where also a number of people, experts, evaluate applications in specific fields. So maybe you have committee for book and literature, there's a committee for performing arts, and so on. I'm not that familiar with the structure because I'm not in the ministry, so I don't want to give you some wrong answers. But basically, there are committees for each sector or cultural or artist sector, and we have one committee for everything. But when we divide, when we get applications, when we close the call for application proposals, each expert gets a specific number of applications based on their expertise and the narrower field of interest and professional field.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I was just wondering, it's not very typical foundation, which we know from other countries. And the question would be if you had a model, like, or it's which model inspired this model of Kultura Nova? Or other examples which you took as base to create this structure?
Well, our core business was developed according to the needs from the field, and which is something that civil society organizations active primarily in the field of contemporary arts and culture needed. And how we function, well, there is no direct model, but definitely when thinking of improvement or changes, we always look at not just other foundations, but similar bodies in other countries and read how they conceptualize their granting models and what they fund, how they do that, what's the process. So basically we learn from different practices, but definitely we listen to the comments and the feedback we get from our beneficiaries and from our applicants. For example, for technical improvements, that's something we first look at. When we read reports and so on, for example, their wish was to digitalize everything, and we are on a way to be completely digitalized. So from applying to reporting, everything is online in the system we created, and that it's a unique system that Kultura Nova has. Basically profiles of the organizations, and the whole documentation is there. And also we have like an interface to communicate with them. It's kind of an inbox for users, which means there are no strict emails and or phone calls. Of course, we are always there and there is a phone line and everything, but for specific questions and to get a quicker answer, we use that inbox interface to connect and to communicate.
And still going back to the Tamara's question, how was it possible for this body to appear? Because we, at least in our post-socialist context, we know that the perception of a strong civil society is kind of endangering the existing political elites, and they would oppose to granting money, especially structural support, to potential opponents of their politics and so on. So isn't it how, like, what was the door which you entered to make it created? Like who from political part supported actually a stronger civil society, or was it kind of pre-EU integration policy, or what was that was created these conditions?
On a more sarcastic level, I would say that the universe aligned at the moment to constitute a foundation. Well, I think the process covered and leftist and rightist political options, and I don't know, I can't give you the right answer. It was just the matter of time, and actually the perfect moment maybe was before EU accession of Croatia. I don't want to give any wrong answer right now, but the process continued from different governments and different options. And I would say that we, on operational level, are successful and have trust not only from our beneficiaries, but also from the government and the ministry, and which is why we still exist. And I think we are example of good practice in Croatia, and which keeps our autonomous.
Yeah, I believe not only in Croatia, but also in the former Yugoslav region.
That is, with Kultura Nova and let's say halves for audiovisual aspect of, yeah, those are two important bodies for, let's say, more independent sector, non-institutionalized activities and actors.
May I ask you one more question? You mentioned that you also do some kind of research, or you try to help the independent sector develop. So you as foundation also somehow contribute with, how does it happen? Like you have some experts you invite to do some research? Or...
Yes, so in my presentation, I said that along with the support program, in order to know more about the context and the needs, in 2014, there was a new department formed, Research and Development, with their programs. Through that department, my colleagues work with external experts, also researchers and so on, depending on the need. And there is an educational program. For example, at the moment, the applications we get are really good and really on a high level. And it's harder and harder to evaluate them because they are well written and very concrete. At the beginning, it wasn't so. It was all a learning process. And for example, we saw that there is a moment for further education, which is why we, on a yearly basis, not my department, but the research and development organizes the education for writing projects, for example. And that way we try to learn how to approach to projects, how to approach to applications, not for us, but in general, and to make them more successful on national level and internationally when they apply for foreign funds or European programs and so on. Or our core businesses support program and the money which we get. That's one question for Vyacheslav, I think. So there is a national lottery fund, something like that, let's say, and there is a document saying who gets what percentage of money on a year basis. The percentage is more or less fixed, and the amount varies from how much money was gained through lottery and games on chance. So if it's a good year, let's say many sports events, or there's more money, and the state invested that money in sports, in culture, and other civil society sectors, and we get one portion of that. So when it comes to research, we are also beneficiaries, meaning that we try to apply on foreign funds and EU funds and programs with consortium and partners, and explore some ideas, problems, and so on, and to canalize that further for our actions and so on. So basically, the money we use in research and development is something that we get through our projects as foundation, and the money we get from the lottery is invested in beneficiaries, generally speaking.
And if I understand, this idea of development is to understand better the needs of the independent culture.
Yes, maybe would you like me to share our website in English with you? Maybe I can. And there are some, you can download all books we have. Some are bilingual and some are unfortunately just in Croatian, but here I will try to give you at least overview. Here is the link. I will try to see if I have. Here it is. Here are some editions we have published through our library. So there was, for example, a research on working conditions. We had the whole research and strategy for forming cultural centers, actually socio-cultural centers, which are governed by both by local authorities, let's say city, and NGOs, that is civil society organizations. And then the last was research on COVID and pandemic in Croatia. And also we participated in, well, my presentation was derived from the analysis which I mentioned in the beginning, because I think the Minister of Croatia is at some new stage, and after many, many years, trying to bring a new strategy for culture, and the director of Kultura Nova, Vidovic, participated in it. So in my memo, I briefly explained the analysis and 4 phases, but it will be published in the coming period. I don't know if it's going to be in English. Maybe it will. So maybe you will get the chance to learn something more and to see where the Ministry of Culture in Croatia stands for the coming period, years actually.
May I ask, in the meantime, you also support multi-annual, you give also multi-annual support grants. How is it possible from fiscal perspective? Is it like you more or less count on the same amount of money each year, and then you can plan these expenditures?
Yes. So in program area 1, 4, and 5, 1 is for operational grants, and 4 and 5 are platforms. That is cooperation between organizations in Croatia and cooperation of organization in Europe. For the best placed, which is 1 in program area 4 and 5, 1 organization, actually 1 project proposal, and 4 per category in program area 1, that is a total, and here 11, so 11 proposals in total per year the best proposals get the chance to be funded through 3 years, which means that's about $1.5 million kuna, which is, let's say, roughly around 150,000 euros, which need to be like saved, counted on for the next period, coming year. But we give 30-year grant, which means if you have 3 years of grant, each year you sign a new contract, but you don't need to apply, just need to submit to us the plan of activities and your budget plan for the following year. And that's only for the best, let's say, 10 organizations, that is project proposals. And that's like more or less the amount of money that is kind of a secure, and we can count that we will get that in the following 2 years. It's conservative planning.
If anyone has other questions, I will be using this time while no one raises hand. I have maybe just one more question related to the public institutions, cultural institutions. I mean, they cannot apply to your fund, but does your fund impact their work? Does it show a kind of a different way of working? I mean, and civil society organizations who are receiving funds, and the criteria which you will apply when selecting the projects and so on. Does this create a kind of awareness among public cultural institutions on how to operate, how to be more efficient, how to reach out to audiences and so on? Like, the criteria which usually you would use in your evaluation processes, do they migrate to other institutions, and or you are in 2 parallel worlds, like you don't interact in any way?
No, what I would, we are also public institution, and let's say for the institutions who are like us, giving grants or something, we are definitely known, and we are example of good practices. and they are aware of us, and some of them are interested in some models and ways of doing things. But if we speak about cultural public institutions, well, that's, I would say, another story. And also, I'm not the expert in that field, but they are founded through the Ministry of Culture, more or less, and maybe something they for their own self, I don't know what, but basically they are secure, which was one of the motives to have Kultura Nova Foundation established, because so much money is given to public institutions in culture, let's say state museums, theaters, and so on. And there is a national theater gets more money or almost the same amount of money on a yearly basis from the ministry as we as Kultura Nova get for 120 organizations. So the discrepancy is really high, and I don't know, when you have secure funding, there is no motive to do anything differently. And that is something that should be thought in the terms of Ministry of Culture. And well, we are excluded from that. And on the operational level, well, I must say that some organizations use venues of those institutions for their activities. So there's a good example when our organizations, that is organizations, let's say, used Museum of Contemporary Art for productions and so on. That's okay. That's a good relation and communication, but it's, I would say, on a basic level between actors.
It's from what I know, I was a few times in Croatia. From what I could see, there is a tendency for civil society organizations to do cooperations with public institutions and structures, and create even sometimes this kind of mixed bodies governed both by civil society and by public administration. For example, the Zagreb Pogon Zagreb Center for Art and Youth, I think it's called.
That's on a local level. That's what I mentioned, because in one of the resources I linked here, there's a book on how cultural centers should be structured. And we have many examples, I mean, not many, but we have a few examples in other cities as well. And it's governed by local authorities plus that is associations. But it's more like alternative places and for various production in arts. And cooperation, as you said, exists. It's on a operative level, but well, they get funds from the state and civil society organization, also from the state, from Kultura Nova, and in last few years, some of the biggest organizations from EU programs, and which is when greater things can happen on a greater scale, let's say.
Yeah, I'm thinking if for Ministry of Culture you play like a good role model, why wouldn't Ministry of Culture borrow or transfer or expand your practice also to the public domain? What stops it from implementing some good practices on the level, maybe not on the level of national cultural institutes, because these are kind of, how to say, saint bodies and shouldn't be touched, but at least on local levels, if anything could be more actively implemented, or the idea networking platforms which you support actively on national and subnational level, which is, and also in the region.
Well, I would say that's the matter of politics, and not everything can be as we would like it to be, and the ministry has their own policies and working context, and I don't know, and the changes are slow, and who knows when the turn will happen. But if speaking like in rough numbers, I would say that some changes should happen not on the level of national level, that is ministry, but on local level, because when you look like a cascade of money from the state budget, well, we have so many local government and on a local level administration, and each city has its own granting process, and which is often so confusing and not even developed, just basically in baselines developed. And I think more education on that level should be done in order for those because we fund organizations from all over the Croatia, but we would like them for them to get funding from the local level and then from national levels, and that is something that I think we should work on. How to communicate and how to advocate changes on local levels.
And do you have a law that regulates the funding on local level? Like if there is a sort of law for transparency of spending public funds, which is used for the competitions on local level?
There is, but it's very basic, and I'm not sure how adequate for all program it is. Also, there is, we are also, as I said, mainly for organizations that in contemporary arts and cultures, and on the local level you have other organizations and institutions, individuals, and so on. So it's a bit different, and it's hard to judge everything, but there is a process, but I would say it could be better developed in order to give everyone equal opportunity.
Dear colleagues, you have maybe other questions to ask Mariana? It's a great opportunity to do it now, to go more in detail, but if not, we hope we can meet some other time, even physically in Chisinau or somewhere else, to work on our own models for cultural fund in Moldova, in Georgia, in Belarus, and maybe in other countries. So I don't see any raised hands and written questions. Then I propose to finish here. And thank you very much, Mariana, for your will to share your experience with us. It's very, very special model, which we heard about today. We will for sure try to keep it in mind when creating our own proposals, and we hope to see you some other time. And for everyone, thank you for joining. And
Thank you very much. Thanks.
we will have a recording of the session also published on our Coalition of Independent Cultural Sector in Moldova website. So just take it from there and share it with your friends. Have a nice
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.